Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for joining. My name is Kate Van Steenhouse. I'm the Assistant Director for the Kansas Arts Commission, and this is our meeting info session about our artist roster program. We may have some others joining, but for the sake of time, I wanted to go ahead and get started. We will do an overview about what the whole program entails and talk through the application process, and then we will have plenty of time for questions at the end. So feel free to hang out, put questions in the chat, and then we can open up for larger group discussion at the end. Nick and Ben, let's start with just you guys want to introduce yourselves so we know who is here from the staff.
Ben Stanton, Communications Coordinator.
And I'm Nick Carswell. I'm a field rep, a creative industries specialist for the Arts Commission.
Excellent. Thank you both. Okay. So, as those of you already on this call probably already know, because you're here and you're connected with us, the Kansas Arts Commission is the official state arts agency for Kansas. And we are dedicated to promoting and supporting and expanding the creative industries and enriching communities through arts and culture. We all know that arts and culture are the backbone of enriching communities, so we can help spread that word far and wide. Hang on one second. Okay, this is our team. I always like to show this information for every info session we do, as we have a really broad and diverse team that can assist with questions and any kind of program inquiries that you may have. For the purposes of the artist rosters programming, Nick and myself are really your primary points of contact, but again, we have a whole team who is here to assist as need may be. So today, this is what we're going to cover. I'm going to talk through an overview of what the roster programs are all about. We have 2 roster programs, so we'll talk through both of those. We'll talk through expectations for roster artists, and then really just the whole process of how to apply. Eligibility, review criteria, the project criteria, all of that. And then we will get to questions. Okay, so how the rosters work from the artist side. So as I said, we have 2 rosters that are active at the moment. The first is the Kansas Touring Artists roster, and that is our approved roster of artists and groups that present programming out across the state. And that is available for companies or individual artists. We have both currently on the roster. And you can see here the different categories that the artists are currently listed within. Applications are not limited to these categories per se. These are just the categories of artists that we currently have. So the idea is to present Kansans with as wide a variety of programming options as possible. And our second roster is the Public Art and Muralist roster. And so this serves as an approved list of artists specializing in public art and mural work, and really to be used as a resource, because we know that more and more communities are interested in doing public works. Okay, so I just want to talk through briefly how these programs work from the funding side, which isn't specifically what this meeting is about, but I wanted to give an overview of the whole picture. So once artists are on the roster, organizations can then apply for funding to bring the touring roster artists to do presentations. With the mural and public art, the roster is really more of just a resource guide. There is not specific separate funding stream available for mural and public art projects. There is our regular mural and public art grant. There's also the Arts Everywhere grant programs, which could encompass public art. But for touring roster programs specifically, there is a funding source for organizations who would like to bring roster artists to do programs. Those operate on a rolling application deadline where the applications just need to be received at a minimum of 6 weeks in advance. Actually, that's a typo. It's 8 weeks in advance. We will make sure that that's updated on the website. And we will be sharing these slides out after this presentation, so we'll also make sure it's updated there. So rolling deadline, as long as our applications are received 8 weeks in advance. Organizations can use up to $1,000 of a credit to help with their in-kind matching costs or increased artist fee costs. And that funding stream is available to any 501c3 nonprofit, units of local government like schools and libraries, and also any federally recognized tribes. Okay. Like I said, for our purposes today, we're really talking about from the artist side, for those who want to be listed on the roster. I will turn this over to Nick to talk through these points about what the touring roster is all about.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. So one of the first things that we list here is the fact that the relationship between the Kansas Arts Commission is really, and the touring roster, is that we maintain the roster, we approve artists. After that, the agreements between the artist and where the artist might get booked is really between those two entities. So the artist or your management and the venue or the presenter sets the fee and negotiates the booking. So I want to be clear that the Arts Commission doesn't have a role within that, aside from supporting the roster as a group, as a group who are offering these services. So we do want to see a history of touring. The fee range, we've talked about this quite a bit, and it's, while we don't, again, it's really up to you entirely, but fees within a reasonable and professional range, and there is a lot of leeway on that depending on where you're coming from, travel, how much touring you do, your expenses, the size of your group, or etc. So that is one thing that is kind of there, is specific to each artist on the roster, but you are required also to perform outside your community, really as to fit the eligibility as a touring artist. So the other thing to note is that in addition to the performances, we encourage and require optional services, an educational public-facing component that can be a workshop, master classes, so lectures, a lot of interactive, a lot of educational and youth or education-facing components are very popular, so that an artist would come in, have a performance, but might also have a hands-on workshop or a masterclass or something that might engage youth is a very common way to do it. It's one of the most successful aspects of the roster, or additional short performances as well that can be listed there. So it's really, there's again a lot of leeway. The mechanism to support the kind of relationship between the touring roster artist and the venue allows for a lot of different options, but it must have that public facing in addition to the engagement piece, in addition to the performance. And then this kind of boilerplate here, but really the being on the roster doesn't guarantee that you receive bookings, but we're working as hard as we can to make those connections, add value to it. But again, simply because of the mechanism, the design of it, we're really connecting. That's the best thing we can do. We're also showcasing, finding more opportunities to showcase, but we stop short of actually booking and making that connection, between that hands-on connection. At some point it's handed over to the artist and the venues and the presenters. So it is, lots of people use it as something on their resume, as something to put on their website. You are joining a peer group of other artists, so it connects you to that community, and that is something we've been working on over the past year or so. There are other professional development opportunities. There's good networking. There's a lot of value to being part of the touring roster. So on the next slide, and it's a lot of the same. What I mentioned will apply to the public art and the roster. We're really looking for experienced artists who certainly, as it relates to muralists who have done mural, have worked in the public sphere before. The fee range, is one of the interesting parts in here. We don't have a hand on it, but we want to see that that's established. That once folks who are looking to connect either touring touring artists or public art or muralists, that they know that they're getting a certain caliber of artists. They know that the fees are well established and there's at least a fee structure in that sense. And again, the design of the program is to get people moving around the state outside of your community, and this both aspects of the touring roster and the public art and muralists require that additional service, public facing engagement, really just to enrich the experience of bringing these artists to these communities. That's the idea. I think I have one more slide here. Oh yeah, so again, repeating some of what I mentioned here, but we really want to see that there's professionalism, transparency. Some of that is related to pricing, some of that might be related to the content of your work, understanding how you can talk about being an artist, representing yourself, getting into those communities and doing good work through the work that you offer and are able to bring on the road, as it were, through the program. And then, of course, the Visiting Artist Grant is actually how the funding happens, is the mechanism itself. So the Arts Commission staff obviously implement and are available for assistance on that. And then one of the trickier things when we have such a large roster is that your information is up to date, and we're continually working on this, so that your most recent body of work would be reflected, your most recent artist statement. We understand that artists change their practice, change their focus, change what they might want to bring on the road. We want to do our best to reflect that as we continue to develop the roster, find opportunities to showcase. The more excited you are about your work, the more we want to kind of facilitate that. So that is something that we'll do. And Ben here, who's on the call, is our communications coordinator. I'm just naming him because he has a big role to play in that. And we certainly want to promote all the artists on the roster, have as much up to date, and that can be from correct phone numbers to something more maybe exciting, around your most recent body of work. That is a goal, and once you're accepted onto the artist roster, the expectation is that we'll work together to keep all that information up to date.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving on to the how to apply, the nitty-gritty of how to apply. Everything I'm going to talk through in this section is also available in our guidelines and on this primary website, as well as the submittable application site. So we will also follow up with all of these resources, make sure that everybody has the information at their fingertips. So applicant information, any Kansas-based nonprofit artist group, individual, school or collective groups, and also for-profit groups are eligible to apply for this. We have currently, artists collectives that function as small businesses. We have entire artist groups like Wichita Children's Theater is on the roster. And we also have a lot of solo artists who are on the rosters and present programming. We will recruit panelists to review applications, and they will use these 3 criterion points as their primary review criteria. So artistic quality, artistic merit, and quality of services. So this is the primary thing that will be considered when reviewing applications. Capability and experience. So roster artists need to have a clear evidence of experience and being reliable. Being on the roster is essentially receiving, the green light from the Arts Commission. So we need to be sure that for artists that are on the roster, that we trust that they will be, effectively managed, that they have quality programs that can be promoted and implemented. And then lastly, impact. Last but not least, impact. So the ability for the applicant to impact teaching. And when we say teaching and learning it doesn't have to be in a formal educational setting. But as Nick said before, the idea behind the roster program is to get more Kansas artists and programming out and about across the state. So when I say teaching and learning in and through the arts, whenever we present programs in each other's communities, we are teaching and learning about each other and about what everyone does. So that's really what that means. Integrating the arts discipline into non-arts curriculum and content areas is always great. And the quality of complementary activities we'll get into a little bit more. Okay. So criteria, just to break it down even further. Experienced high-quality artists with professional reputation provide public performances or presentations of their work. Not all roster artists are performance-based. Some are visual artists or literary artists, media arts. There's a lot of different ways that those presentations can take shape. Provide meaningful educational or community activities with students or community groups. So interactive performances, demonstrations, panel discussions, workshops, talks, that can look like any number of things. The idea is that the visiting artist doesn't just come into the community, do a kind of, for lack of a better word, like a one-sided performance or program and then leaves. There needs to be an opportunity for community members to really get to know the artist on a deeper level. And yeah, to be a touring roster artist, you need to be willing to travel and tour. A minimum of 60 miles is what we require for the funding. But it's also just a good rule of thumb. If you are applying to be a roster artist, you can just know that, like, oh yeah, I'm going to need to travel. And as Nick mentioned before, in the application, when you're asked about your fee structure, that's something to take into account. And the current roster artists that are listed, some of them do have travel fees or mileage or that sort of thing. For the public art and muralists, similarly, applicants must be experienced, high-quality artists with a professional reputation, and again, be willing to travel. Okay, so the application process. All of our applications are submitted through our submittable platform, and the address is there. We will also put it in the chat and follow up with it. You can expect to provide some basic biographical information about who you are, what you do. Description of the programming that you would like to offer. So this is where it gets a little more specific. You may be a poet, and you're giving us your bio and sort of general information about the type of poetry you do. The programming information is really, like what would your presentation look like if someone's bringing you to a library to give a poetry workshop? What would that look like? So that's where this is your chance to get a little more specific and really think about what type of programming do I as an artist want to offer. And then, contact information, website, that kind of nitty-gritty basic program fees, as we've already mentioned, and then also work samples and any kind of certification documents. We need in the application to have some sort of proof of residency, so something that tells us, like, yes, this person is a Kansas resident. Be careful. Please don't upload anything that has sensitive personal information for yourself, though. Some people upload an image of their driver's license, for example, but will block out the actual number, for example. Okay, so support materials that go along with those certification documents. They could include any of these things. So examples of past programming, video snippets, recording snippets, marketing materials like brochures, past press releases, reviews, that sort of thing, resume, and also letters of recommendation. I would recommend that you go into the application and kind of click through and look to see what types of things are required before you start amassing these materials, because not all of these things are required, just a handful. Okay. So basics. Applications are open now, and the deadline for submission is 11:59 p.m. on Friday, November 1st. So you have a couple weeks still to get things together. Again, the applications are hosted on our submittable portal. So there's the address. Excuse me. Artists of all disciplines are encouraged to apply. We do not have rules about who is able to apply. Nick, can you take over for 1 second, please?
Sure. Um, of course, the one exception is you do have to be a Kansas resident, I would say, that in terms of rules. One of the questions that we've gotten from existing artists is how best to classify yourself if you do multiple things, which can be a challenge. So there is some leeway on that. You do have to present a primary discipline. Again, people's artistic practices change a little bit, but you'll need to kind of make that distinction. I think the best thing to do is to look at the existing roster, and you might get a clue of how people who are multidisciplinary, might offer, especially supporting programs in other disciplines, or might be a teaching artist but don't want to be listed primarily as a teaching artist. So there is leeway in there. Really, in my opinion, the best way to get good info is look at who's on there and look at how they've dealt with it.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Any questions? You are welcome to unmute and just ask your questions, or feel free to put things in the chat and we can help out. I see that Nick and Ben have already added a bunch of links. That's fantastic.
I think beyond the specifics of this program, it's always a good idea if you know some of the artists. I think I'm going pretty heavy on your research here, but you can also reach out to existing cohort artists or roster artists and get their feedback. And that's a really good place to start, and that's just good practice. And any kind of grant you're applying for, look to see who might have gotten one previously, or so there's a great list. It's all publicly listed, I think, right down to their phone numbers. Obviously, cold calling somebody you don't know is probably not the best plan, but if you have connections to some of those artists, that's going to be very helpful. And I would love for you to hear from them rather than us, honestly. Get the first-hand experience.
Yeah, agreed. That's an excellent point. Just a bit about process before we sign off. First of all, if you have any questions, this is our main email address where any questions can go. I'll also put my email in the chat. Applications are due, as I said, just before midnight on November 1st. Then we will host, we'll give our panelists some time to review and score those applications, and we will host review meetings, which applicants are always invited to our review meetings so that you can hear the feedback from the panelists, which is very helpful. And then following that, we will finalize decisions by the end of the year so that any newly accepted artists onto the roster can get their profile pages built and really join starting in early 2025. That is the plan. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. We will share this recording and share this information and the slide deck in the next couple of weeks to really help make sure that everyone has this information. And we hope you apply. As Nick said, the roster group has really become just a lively way to keep in touch with other Kansas artists and kind of share tips of the trade, things that are working for different people across the state, connect with each other on opportunities. So it's a great resource and a really strong group of artists, and we hope to have more of you join. All right, thank you so much, and we will end the meeting for today. Thanks for your time.